Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a creature feature comprised of 300 pages and was published by HarperCollins in the year 2016. I was able to listen to this through my Overdrive app, which is associated with my local library, and it is comprised of 9 hours and 41 minutes. It is narrated by both Chris Patton and Jonathan Yen. This is a dark, humorous, witty, coming-of-age werewolf story. We follow a unlikely family, outsiders if you will, on the outskirts of society. It is gritty, it is raw. They are mongrels, mixed breeds, neither human nor werewolf. Well, for some. We follow a boy who is at the center of this story, who has to decide whether or not he belongs to the family that is clearly werewolves, which is mostly comprised of what's left of the family. We have Aunt Libby and Uncle Darren. There's also mention of Grandpa for the first few chapters in this story, or whether he fits in with the people that are on the other side of the tracks. Darren and Libby will eventually know whether or not their nephew is like them or not. We follow their journey, which toggles between both past and present. We have a very humorous explanation of the way they live, but this is kind of what fell flat for me. The writing style made them seem very backwoods, and maybe that was the point. For me, however, it drew away from the beauty and the legacy that is a werewolf. I grew up in a very combined mixed bag of descriptives of werewolf, where I had Michael J. Fox's Teen Wolf, and I was later introduced to the world of Underworld, where you had werewolves that were strong and majestic and fierce. And then you had this beauty that came along just in between all of that. That was Joss Whedon. And Joss Whedon really changed the way we look at monsters as a whole, werewolves included. So with that mixed bag of definitions, you can see that my taste and style of werewolves differ vastly. And I think for me that was a defining factor in how I chose to take in this book. Now, I was told by someone whom I trust as far as their reading tastes and styles that perhaps this book was not the best type of book to listen to through audio. I may have interpreted it differently had I sat down and actually read it in its physical form. I don't believe that to be true. Just based on the descriptive and the overall narration of the story, I think that regardless if I listen to someone else read the words or whether I read the words for myself, the story is just too gritty for me. The explanation of mongrels is a crossbreed that should never have been. In that sense, mongrels is beautiful. It has an amazing definition of really where werewolves came to be. I thought that was mind-blowing. However, the entire time I was taking in this story, despite the fact of really enjoying that flawlessness between the past and present descriptives of this family, I was getting a Beverly Hillbillies vibe. And there is even a reference in chapter 17 to the Beverly Hills werewolves. And this is exactly how I interpreted the story throughout. It's very backwoods, it's very oaky, and don't get me wrong, Okies are people too, but I had a very hard time seeing this as a modern perspective of werewolves. I guess in some sense of the way, I kind of always made werewolves out to be a bit more distinguished than this book makes them to be. Perhaps I missed something along the way, because there are several people whom I respect in the horror community that review books on a regular basis that read and reviewed this book and gave it a much higher rating than I gave it overall. For my finality, I gave this book 3 stars. Now, just because I rated it as such does not mean that you should defer yourself to not read it. I definitely encourage everyone to take this in for yourself. Creature features are one of those unique types of books that it's really based on interpretation. I I gave you a multitude of descriptives for decades of different types of werewolves. So for me, having compared that to those types of werewolves, your exposure to werewolves might be very different. So your overall star rating might be much higher and you might actually enjoy this story. Again, it is humorous. I'll have to say the 30 minutes or less line had me rolling. But I highly encourage you to read this story for yourself. It is definitely worth that. The book also received the Bram Stoker Award for Best Novel of 2016, as well as the Shirley Jackson Award for Novel of 2016. And it allots for us to see a boy grow into a man, or something like that.